The nurse paused at the doorway before she spoke. I knew something was wrong before a single word left her mouth. After 70 years of living, you learn to recognize the expressions people wear when they are carrying someone else's decision. Doctors have one face when they have good news, another when they have bad news. But nurses have a different one altogether when they know something has happened that should never have happened. She stepped into room 318 at Mercy Regional Hospital in Charleston, South Carolina, holding my evening medication in one hand and my chart in the other. "Mr. Harrison." Her voice was careful. "I need to ask you something." I looked away from the television mounted high on the wall. "What is it?" She hesitated. "Did you tell your daughter-in-law that your church pastor isn't allowed to visit you?" For a moment I thought I had heard her wrong. "My pastor?" She nodded slowly. "Pastor Samuel Brooks came about 20 minutes ago. He said he's been your pastor for nearly 25 years. I waited. He was told he couldn't come inside. The room became strangely quiet. "Who told him that?" The nurse looked toward the door before answering. "There is an instruction attached to your patient file. It says all visitors must receive approval from your immediate family." I frowned. "I never asked for that." "I didn't think you did." She lowered her voice. "The instruction was added this morning." Another pause. "By your daughter-in-law." I stared at the white ceiling above my hospital bed. Funny how hospital ceilings all look the same. Plain, cold, perfect for thinking. Especially when someone has just crossed a line they never should have crossed. "My name is Thomas Harrison. I am 70 years old. For 43 years, I owned a small hardware store on King Street before retiring. My late wife, Margaret, used to joke that I could identify every nail ever manufactured simply by looking at it. She wasn't entirely wrong. I believed every problem had a proper tool. Every door had the right key. Every lock had the right way to open it. People weren't much different. If you paid attention long enough, eventually they showed you exactly who they were. Margaret died 3 years ago. Cancer. 8 months from diagnosis until goodbye. Long enough to prepare the paperwork. Not nearly long enough to prepare the heart. Since then, my son, Daniel, had visited almost every weekend. He was a good man, kind, hard-working. The kind of son every father hopes to raise. Daniel was never the problem. His wife, Emily, that was different. Emily never shouted, never argued, never insulted anyone. She smiled. She volunteered. She remembered birthdays. She organized family dinners. She always offered to help. Every single thing she did looked loving. That was exactly what made it dangerous, because real control rarely announces itself. It arrives wearing kindness. The first year after Margaret died, Emily insisted on organizing my medications. "It'll make life easier." The second year, she wanted copies of my house keys, in case of emergencies. The third year, she started answering questions people asked me directly. Dad gets confused sometimes. I wasn't confused. I was simply slower. There's a difference. Most people never notice it. Emily counted on that. When I suffered a heart attack 4 days earlier while trimming hedges outside my house, she arrived at the hospital before my son finished speaking with the cardiologist. She hugged every nurse, learned everyone's name, asked intelligent questions, thanked every doctor. Within hours, she looked less like a visitor, and more like someone running the place. At the time, I thought she was simply being helpful. Now, Pastor Brooks had been turned away, because of paperwork I had never approved. The nurse's name tag read, "Melissa." She watched me quietly. "I'm sorry." I nodded. "Melissa?" "Yes?" "Would you hand me my phone?" She didn't ask why. She simply reached into the bedside drawer and placed it gently into my hand. As my fingers wrapped around it, I felt something I hadn't felt since arriving at the hospital. Control. Whoever believed that lying in a hospital bed meant I couldn't protect my own life had made a very expensive mistake. I unlocked my phone, scrolled to one familiar name, smiled for the first time all week. Then I pressed call. Constance Miller answered before the second ring. She always did. Some people pick up a phone because it rings. Constance picked up because she understood that people rarely called an attorney after 7 o'clock in the evening unless something had already gone wrong. "Thomas?" Her voice was calm. "I wasn't expecting your call. I'm at Mercy Regional." Silence. "Then what happened?" "Heart attack." Another pause. "Are you stable?" "I am now. I'll be there. There's something else." I told her everything, not quickly, not emotionally, exactly as it had happened. Pastor Brooks had arrived. He had been stopped at the nurse's station. Someone had placed restrictions on my visitors. My daughter-in-law had represented herself as the decision-maker. When I finished, Constance didn't speak for several seconds. She was thinking. That was one thing I appreciated about her. She never rushed into words. She organized facts first. Thomas. Yes. When we updated your estate plan last October. I remember. Who did you appoint as your healthcare proxy? My son, Daniel Harrison. And anyone else? No. Did we list Emily anywhere? No. She let the silence answer the question for both of us. Then she has absolutely no authority. I looked toward Melissa. The nurse pretended not to be listening. She was listening. Every word. Constance continued. Did Daniel place the restriction? I don't know. But Emily did. I believe so. I'll confirm everything when I arrive. How long? I'm 28 minutes away. I'll meet with the charge nurse before I enter your room. I thanked her. She stopped me before I hung up. Thomas. Yes, don't argue with anyone. Why? Because once someone begins acting beyond their authority, it's always better to correct the paperwork than the person. That sounded exactly like Constance. She had spent 30 years solving problems without raising her voice. We ended the call. Melissa looked at me. Your attorney. I nodded. She smiled. Good. Then she surprised me. Mr. Harrison, I wasn't supposed to tell you about the visitor note. Why did you? She looked toward the hallway. My father spent 6 months in this hospital before he passed away. She folded her hands. Someone tried making decisions for him that weren't theirs to make. I'm sorry. So am I. She smiled sadly. I promised myself if I ever saw it happening again, I'd tell the patient. Before I could answer, someone knocked gently. 3 soft taps. Melissa opened the door. An elderly man stood outside carrying a worn leather Bible. Silver hair, dark blue suit, kind eyes. Pastor Samuel Brooks. I wasn't sure if I should try again. Melissa stepped aside. You don't need anyone's permission anymore. He looked confused. What changed? She smiled. The patient asked for his phone. Pastor Brooks laughed quietly. I should have expected that. 25 years. That was how long he had known me. Long enough to know that if I still had my voice, I would use it. He walked into the room. No dramatic speeches, no loud prayers. He simply placed one hand on my shoulder. It's good to see you, Thomas. It's good to see you too. We sat in comfortable silence. Real friendship doesn't fear silence. About 15 minutes later, another knock came. This one was sharper. Professional. Melissa opened the door again. A woman in a charcoal grey suit stepped inside carrying a leather briefcase. Constance Miller. She smiled when she saw me. Then her eyes moved to my patient chart hanging beside the bed. She walked straight toward it, didn't sit down, didn't introduce herself, didn't waste a second. Instead, she read every page attached to the front. Her expression never changed. When she finished, she quietly removed one sheet of paper, folded it once, placed it inside her briefcase. Then she turned toward Melissa. I'd like to speak with the charge nurse. Melissa nodded immediately. I'll bring her. Pastor Brooks looked at me. What was that I smiled the beginning 20 minutes later? 3 people walked back into my hospital room together. The charge nurse, Constance, and the hospital's patient rights coordinator. None of them looked happy. Constance closed the door behind them. Then she placed a certified copy of my healthcare directive on the bedside table. She looked directly at me. Thomas, the restriction has already been removed. I nodded once. She wasn't finished. And there's something else. What? The person who signed that visitor restriction claimed to be your authorized healthcare representative. Pastor Brooks looked at me. The charge nurse looked at Constance. Constance slowly opened another folder. I'm afraid this conversation is about to become much bigger than a hospital visitor policy. Just then, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Melissa looked toward the door. Her expression changed. They're here. Who? She swallowed. Your son. And Emily. Emily stopped in the doorway. For a brief moment, nobody spoke. Daniel looked from me to Pastor Brooks, then to Constance standing beside my bed with an open folder in her hands. His face carried the confusion of a man who had walked into the middle of a conversation that had already changed everything. Emily recovered first. She always did. Her smile appeared exactly when it needed to. "There you are," she said warmly. "I was wondering why no one answered my messages." Constance closed the folder. "Mrs. Harrison?" Emily turned. "Yes?" "I'm Constance Miller, Mr. Harrison's attorney." Emily smiled politely. "Oh, I didn't realize Thomas had called you." "He did." Daniel looked at me. "Dad, what's going on?" I motioned toward the chair beside my bed. "Sit down." He obeyed without hesitation. Emily remained standing. The patient rights coordinator cleared her throat. "Mrs. Harrison, I need to inform you that the visitor restriction placed on Mr. Harrison's account this morning has been removed." Emily blinked. "I'm sorry." "The restriction was unauthorized. I only asked the staff to limit visitors so Thomas could rest." Constance answered before anyone else could. "According to the documentation you signed, you represented yourself as Mr. Harrison's healthcare decision-maker." Emily's smile faded slightly. "I may have misunderstood the paperwork." "You didn't misunderstand it." Constance's voice remained perfectly calm. "You signed it." Silence settled across the room. Daniel slowly looked toward his wife. "Emily." She immediately turned toward him. "I was only trying to protect your father." Pastor Brooks finally spoke. "I don't doubt that you believe that." Everyone looked at him. He continued quietly. "But protection without permission becomes control." The words hung in the room. Daniel lowered his eyes. Emily folded her arms. "I think everyone is making this much bigger than it really is." I looked at her. "Do you?" She met my eyes. "I've spent 4 days in this hospital." She nodded. "I know. My pastor was turned away. I didn't think visitors were good for your recovery. My attorney had to correct paperwork you created. I was helping." I nodded slowly. "There it is." "What? The word?" Emily frowned. "What word?" "Helping." For the first time since she entered the room, she had no immediate answer. I continued. 3 years ago, you insisted on organizing my medications. I was helping. You wanted copies of my house keys. I was helping. You began answering questions people asked me directly. I was helping. You started scheduling repairs to my house without asking. I was helping. Daniel looked at his wife. His expression had changed, not angry, not defensive, thoughtful, as if memories were quietly rearranging themselves. Emily noticed it too. She reached for his hand. "Daniel." He didn't pull away, but he didn't squeeze her hand either. Constance gently closed her briefcase. "Mr. Harrison asked me to review more than today's paperwork." Emily looked toward her. "What does that mean?" "It means we'll be updating every legal document connected to his medical care, finances, and property." Emily's shoulders stiffened. "Why?" "So there will never again be uncertainty about who has authority." I wasn't trying to take authority. I finally spoke. "No." Everyone looked at me. You were becoming accustomed to it. The room became completely silent. Even the hallway outside seemed quieter. Emily looked away for the first time that evening. Daniel slowly stood. "Dad." His voice was almost a whisper. "Did you really think I knew about this?" I looked directly into my son's eyes. "I honestly don't know." His shoulders dropped. I didn't. I believed him. Immediately. Because Daniel had never learned to lie with his face. Emily quietly said his name. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned toward Pastor Brooks. "Would you pray with Dad?" Pastor Brooks smiled gently. "I'd be honored." Everyone bowed their heads. Everyone except Emily. She stood near the window, staring into the hospital parking lot. When the prayer ended, Daniel walked over and kissed my forehead. "I'll come back tomorrow morning. I'll be here." He nodded. Then he looked at Emily. "We should go." She hesitated. "For just a second." Then she picked up her purse without another word. The door closed behind them. Pastor Brooks looked toward me. "I don't think this is over." Neither did I. Because tomorrow, we weren't just going to talk about a visitor restriction. We were going to talk about 3 years of boundaries that had slowly disappeared. Daniel arrived the next morning at exactly 8 to 10. He came alone. The first thing I noticed was that he wasn't carrying coffee. For years, whenever he visited me, he brought 2 cups, one for himself, one for me. Hospital rules didn't allow coffee after my procedure, yet he still brought it every visit because Margaret had always said the smell of fresh coffee could make any room feel less lonely. This morning his hands were empty. That told me everything. He hadn't slept much. "Morning, Dad. Morning." He sat beside the bed without speaking. For nearly a minute neither of us said anything. Finally he looked up. I asked Emily if she placed that restriction. And she admitted she did. I nodded. She said she honestly believed she was protecting you. I believe she believes that. He looked surprised. You do, yes. Then why are we here? Because believing you're helping doesn't give you the right to make someone else's decisions. Daniel leaned forward. I've been thinking all night. I figured. He sighed. I kept remembering little things. What kind of things? The house keys. I smiled sadly. You remember, I thought she was just trying to make life easier. So did I. And the medications. I nodded. And scheduling repairs without asking you first. He rubbed his forehead. I never noticed the pattern. Patterns are difficult to see when you only witness one piece at a time. He stared at the floor. I failed you. No. He looked up immediately. You trusted your wife. Maybe too much. Trust isn't failure. Silence settled between us again. A soft knock interrupted it. Constance walked in carrying another folder. Good morning. Daniel stood. Ms. Miller. She smiled politely before taking a seat. I finished the revised documents. Daniel looked confused. So quickly. I started last night. She opened the folder. Thomas, everything is now protected. She reviewed each page carefully. The healthcare directive remains exactly as you wanted. I nodded. The durable power of attorney now contains additional language preventing anyone from acting unless expressly authorized. Another page. I've also prepared written hospital instructions stating that your pastor, physician, attorney, and any visitor you personally approve may visit without third-party permission. Daniel listened carefully. Constance looked at him. This isn't about excluding family. It's about protecting your father's choices. I understand. I think you do. After signing the final page, I placed the pen back on the tray. 45 years of signing business contracts had taught me one lesson. Good documents prevent bad arguments. Constance gathered the papers. There is one final recommendation. What is it? I'd like the 3 of you to meet after you're discharged. Daniel nodded immediately. I want that too. No lawyers, no hospital, no paperwork. Just a conversation. I agreed. Before leaving, Constance paused. Thomas. Yes, you handled this correctly. I waited too long. Perhaps. She smiled. But you didn't wait until it was impossible. After she left, Daniel looked at me. I don't know what happens next. Neither do I. But I know something has to change. It will. That afternoon, physical therapy cleared me to walk the hallway. Slowly, carefully. Melissa walked beside me while I held the railing. You look stronger today. I feel stronger. I think getting your voice back helped. It did. She smiled. So did asking for my phone. We both laughed quietly. As we reached the window overlooking the parking lot, I saw a familiar blue SUV pull into a space. Emily stepped out. She stood beside the driver's door for several seconds without moving. She wasn't fixing her hair. She wasn't checking her phone. She was simply standing there, thinking. When she finally looked toward the hospital entrance, I saw something I had never seen on her face before. Not confidence, not control, uncertainty. For the first time since Margaret's funeral 3 years earlier, Emily looked like someone who wasn't sure she knew the right thing to do. I had a feeling our conversation after my discharge would decide much more than our relationship. It would decide what kind of family we were going to become. I was discharged 6 days later. The doctors were pleased with my recovery. Melissa walked me to the hospital entrance. Before I got into the car, she smiled and said, "Keep speaking for yourself, Mr. Harrison." "I intend to." She shook my hand. "I think you'll do just fine." 2 weeks later, the 3 of us sat around my dining room table. The same table Margaret and I had bought during our first year of marriage. 42 years of birthdays, Christmas dinners, arguments, laughter. Now it was about to witness another important conversation. Daniel arrived first. Emily came a few minutes later. She wasn't carrying flowers or dessert or one of her carefully prepared smiles. She simply sat down. No one rushed to fill the silence. Finally, she looked at me. "I owe you an apology." I waited. She took a slow breath when Pastor Brooks was turned away. I honestly believed I was protecting you. I know, but that's not the whole truth. Daniel turned toward her. She continued, I've spent most of my life believing that if I controlled every situation, nothing bad could happen. She looked down at her hands. My father controlled everything. The schedule, the money, the conversations. He called it taking care of the family. I grew up believing love meant managing people. Tears formed in her eyes. I never realized I was doing the same thing. The room remained quiet. Not uncomfortable honest, she looked at me again when Margaret passed away. I thought Daniel needed help taking care of you. Then helping slowly became deciding. She nodded, and deciding slowly became controlling. Daniel reached across the table and held her hand. This time, she held his back. I leaned forward. Emily. She looked up. I believe your apology. Relief crossed her face. But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. She nodded immediately. I understand. You'll have to earn trust again. I will. There will be new boundaries. I expect that. I smiled. For the first time since I've known you, having the right conversation. Pastor Brooks arrived later that evening for dinner, not because anyone needed permission, because I invited him. Emily greeted him herself. I'm sorry for what happened at the hospital. Pastor Brooks smiled kindly. Thank you. That was all he said. Sometimes a short answer carries more grace than a long speech. Dinner felt different. Daniel cooked. Emily asked before helping. No one interrupted anyone. No one answered questions that hadn't been asked of them. The house felt like mine again. A month later, Constance stopped by with copies of my finalized documents. Everything had been updated. Every instruction, every authorization, every signature, every boundary. She placed the folder on the kitchen table. Now, she said, your wishes are protected. I looked out the window toward Margaret's rose garden. Winter had stripped away every flower, but the roots were still alive. Some things survive because they're protected. Others survive because people finally learn how to care for them properly. A few days before Christmas, Daniel called. Dad? Yes? Emily wants to know if it's all right if Pastor Brooks joins us for Christmas dinner. I smiled before answering. You don't need to ask anyone else's permission. A small laugh came through the phone. I suppose that's the lesson we've all learned. It is. Christmas dinner was quieter than it had been in years. Not because there was less love, because there was more respect. When everyone left that evening, I stood alone in the doorway of my home. The cold air carried the sound of church bells from across town. I thought about room 318, about Melissa handing me my phone, about Pastor Brooks waiting in the parking lot, about Constance arriving with the right documents, and about one simple decision, asking for my phone. People often believe life changes because of dramatic moments. Sometimes it changes because, in the middle of your weakest day, you remember that your voice still belongs to you. That heart attack taught me something Margaret had tried to teach me for years. Love doesn't erase boundaries. Real love respects them. I locked my front door, turned off the porch light, and smiled. For the first time in a very long time, everything that truly mattered was exactly where it belonged.